Welcome to Lesson 10 in Through the New Testament in Ancient Greek for absolute beginners. My name is Helene Istay, and I'm your guide as we read through the New Testament in its original beautiful language, the language of ancient Greece, which coincidentally was called Hellenistay. Because each lesson will build on previous lessons, be sure to start with Lesson 1. Let's get started. Today's lesson will cover Matthew 5, verses 21 through 30. It's a continuation of Jesus' most famous sermon, his Sermon on the Mount. And we'll specifically talk about his words about anger and reconciliation, as well as adultery. And our topics as we go through these verses are a review of personal pronouns, substantive adjectives, and adverbs. We're also going to be learning about relative pronouns to add to our pronoun collection. And we'll talk briefly about the number 1, which in Greek is heis, mia, hen. All right, let's read our first verse here. Ekusate hati erethe, tois archaios, ou phoneuses, hastan phoneusse, enachas estai, te krise, ego de lego humin, hati pas ha orgizamenas to adelpho autou, enechas este te krise, hastan epe, to adelpho autou, raka, enechas estai, to sunedrio, hastan epe, more, enechas estai estein geenan tu puras. So we're going to first review some personal pronouns, and remember, personal pronouns are like I, you, me, she, he, we, us, them, and so forth. We don't really have a lot of changes in our personal pronouns in English, but we do have some examples. For example, you always use I if you want to use the subject, and you use me if it's the direct object. Same with us and we. We is the subject and us would be the direct object, and also the indirect object, to us or for us. So there are some examples in English of how it works, just like Greek, but Greek is a lot more particular. So there's an example here of ego, which is used primarily in Greek when you want to emphasize. I, however, in contrast to these previous people, the ancients, I say that if you're angry with your brother, that's just as bad as murder, basically, is what Jesus is saying. Sin is sin, and it's all very, very serious. So we like to dismiss little sins like anger and think it's not so bad that I'm not a murderer. But Jesus here is saying all sin compared to the perfectly pure God is very bad. So it should make us a little bit more afraid of judgment in this case. So ego here is Jesus saying I as opposed to the ancients. All right, and then we have an example of to you, which is dative, because to or for is going to be in the dative form, humin. So you probably hear this a lot. Ego de lego humin. I, however, say to you. And then the brother of him, we would say his brother, is autou. The article is used in addition to that personal pronoun. And then once again, we have his brother. All right, so just a brief review of that personal pronoun. I also want to review the substantive use of adjectives. Here, Jesus is saying that it's just as bad to call somebody a fool as it is to murder. And of course, he's primarily using that as an emphasis on how sin is always bad. But the word here for fool is an adjective. So I thought that would be an interesting use of the substantive use of an adjective. So it's like saying you foolish one instead of you fool, but more. I thought it would be interesting to look at what Bible Hub says about moras, mora, moran. So that's the 3 different versions, masculine, feminine, and neuter. Moran may sound familiar to you. That's where we get the word moron, which is very much related to this, right? So this is the root of the English terms moron, moronic, and it also is used to describe something that's dull or, not doesn't have an edge. inert, mentally inert, dull in understanding, nonsensical, lacking a grip in reality. So you can see how here calling somebody that would definitely be not very nice. And then I got this from Logos, the BDAG, which is my English Greek lexicon of the New Testament and other early Christian writings. We have moras, mora, moran. And this tells you a lot more of the history. Here's foolish and stupid. It's used in these other writings, Hippolytus and Origen, and Contracelsus is the name of the book that Origen wrote. And then you can see it in other places within the New Testament. We also have more description down here. So I just encourage you, if you don't already have access to this New Testament lexicon, it's kind of expensive, but I've been finding it's very worthwhile. And then pointing out here that the adverb is moros, which doesn't change, and that just is foolishly. So you'll foolishly do something. So it describes whatever you're doing. It's an adverb. All right, and then another noun that I wanted to point out here is raka, and that comes from the Hebrew. This is actually a noun, so it's not an adjective used in a substantive way. It's transliterated from Jesus' native language of Aramaic, raka. And that basically is somebody who's empty-headed, without sense, who acts presumptuously and thoughtlessly. And then my BDAG version is very helpful as well. It shows you the Hebrew letters. So this one you read from right to left in Hebrew, raka. So you can see how they took a Hebrew word and transliterated it into Greek. And Aramaic is very similar to Hebrew. Of course, it has its differences, but it's very similar. All right, let's go ahead and introduce the relative pronouns. We've already talked about personal pronouns like I, you, she, he, it. Here, relative would be whoever, whatever, whomever, and whichever. So we're going to go ahead and just point them out here in this verse. Whoever murders will be liable to judgment. This is what the ancients wrote, or the prophets, or the people back in the days of when God was giving the 10 Commandments to Moses and the people. That's probably the reference here to the people of old. But here, whoever murders, hasdan phonuse. That word has is a masculine singular nominative. So you can hear relative pronoun, nominative masculine singular. And we have it again, hastan epe. So whoever says to his brother, raka, and whoever says, fool. So has. I just wanted to point those out because it's a new pronoun we haven't talked about yet, relative pronoun. We'll see it in more forms in the future, but I wanted to at least introduce it to you here. All right, so this is going to be more complex than you need right now, but I just want to point out the similarities between the relative pronoun and the definite article, which we've already seen a lot of. So you'll remember ha, he, ta. Ha and he have that rough breathing mark. The relative pronouns also have the rough breathing mark. You're also going to have a dropping of the tau. Whenever you see that tau, it's going to go away. So you don't have tu, you have who. In the female, you won't have taste, you'll have haste. Genitive is the same in the masculine and the neuter single, as well as the genitive feminine and neuter plural. So we have who and who for masculine and neuter singular, hone. So it's very similar. Let's go ahead and read these. I love saying these quickly because it sounds like you're laughing. Has, hatis, ha, who, haste, who, ho, hey, ho, han, hain, ha, hoi, hi, ha, hone, hois, heis, hois, hus, has, ha. Notice that nominative, you can also have hoitinus. Whoever can also be hoitinus, which is a combination of the relative pronoun and the indefinite pronoun. We'll talk about it in the future. But haitinus is also used for whoever if it's a bunch of females. And then ha is your neuter nominative plural. So we'll go into these. You're going to see them in the future. Don't worry about memorizing all this. I just wanted to point out how similar they are. Basically, just drop the tau and make sure it's rough breathing mark. And otherwise, they're fairly similar. Let's go ahead and read Matthew 5:23 through 24. Eion hun prospheides ta doransu Epita thusiasterion, kake menestes, hati ha adelphasu, eche ti katasu, Office eke ta doran su, emprosthen tu thusiasteriu, kai hupage, proton dialagethi to adelpho su, kai tate elthon prosfere ta doran su. Let's go ahead and review adverbs and second personal pronouns. Starting with adverbs. All right, we have eke is there, we have proton first, and we have tate then. And I'm going to go ahead and point this one out up here. It's called a conjunction in Bible Hub, but it's actually a combination, kind of smushed together of kai, which is a conjunction, and this word eke. So together it's kake. And there. So and there, you remember, would be kake. So here we have personal pronouns. All are the second person singular genitive, your, meaning your singular, not you plural. But Jesus is talking about one particular person, talking to you individually. If you are offering a gift at the altar in the temple, basically it's a gift to God. And there you remember that you have a brother has something against you. In this case, it's not you having something against somebody else, but you know that somebody else is angry at you for something. Then leave your gift there and first, proton, very important, first be reconciled to your brother. Then, tate, you can come back and give your gift to the Lord with a clear conscience. Basically, you are knowing that you have reconciled with your brother. You can give your gift to the Lord more appropriately. So a great example of the use of su. And I put these over here so you could remember all the other forms of the first and second person personal pronouns. Let's go ahead and read Matthew 5, verses 25 and 26. Isthi eunaon to antidiko su taku heos hatu metautu ente hado me patese parado ha antidikas to krite kai ha krites to huperete, kai eis phulakein blethese. Amen lego soi, u me exelthes, ekathen, heos an apados tan eschaton kadrantein. So another short review of our personal pronouns and adverbs. You'll see here's another emphasis adverb to show if you are going to agree with your accuser, it should be quickly. Be sure as you're on your way to court to quickly agree with him. So you're on the way, you're on the road to going to court. You want to do that quickly. Before you even get to court. So that's kind of a nice taku adverb describing the way you agree with your accuser. And then notice this A here, I'm just going to point it out. This has a circumflex accent on it, so you know it's you are singular, so it's second person singular, present indicative active. A without that circumflex is if. And then another one here, an adjective I wanted to point out is eschaton. And here we get the term eschatological or eschatology, the study of the last days. So that kind of helps you remember eschaton, ton eschaton, quadrantein. Quadrantein I'm going to talk about in just a little bit. It's a type of coin. All right, some other personal pronouns. Your, we saw in the previous verse. With him, met autu, that's also going to be genitive. So with him. And then se is you, the accuser is going to deliver you to the judge. So that's an accusative. It's the direct object of deliver. And then down here, I say to you. So that is a personal pronoun, dative, second person singular. I say to you. Amen, lego soi. And then here we have our double negative again, emphatic negation. You will never, ever get out of there. So ekathen is another adverb here, ekathen. So remember in our previous verse, we had kake and eke is there. And now we have ekathen is from there, from there. So just a little bit of elaboration on this term, kadrantein. That is a coin. It's called a quadrantes, and it was used in ancient Rome. And I have some pictures of it here. And it's referred to also in Mark 12, verse 42, when the widow put her last 2 lepta, it's another type of coin, in the offering. And it was here, Mark clarifies that it was, which is the same as a quadrantes. So you're not going to get out of prison until you have no more money left, until the very last quadrantes. It's like the tiniest unit. I guess lepta, 1 lepta is even smaller because it's worth half a quadrantes. But if you're interested in that ancient coinage. All right, let's move on to Matthew 5, verses 27 and 28. Ekusate hate erethe ou moikuses ego de lego humin hati pas ha blepon gunaika prosta epithumesai autain ade emoikusen autain ente cardia autu. So a couple of things to point out here. First, let's review our personal pronoun ego. Again, we see this emphasis. I, however, say, I, as opposed to the ancients, the people in the past have said, don't commit adultery. Jesus is now saying that if you look at a woman with lust, that is considered adultery. So sins are serious in the sight of a pure God. So that's basically why Jesus is emphasizing that you need to accept him as your savior, because even the tiniest sin is going to prevent you from being in the presence of a perfectly holy God. All right, so I, and then to you, who mean. So that's plural. So soy, we saw before, was a singular to you. Here we have plural to you. Now here's our pasapan. I'm going to put this down here so we can remember. So masculine, nominative, singular. Everyone who looks at a woman, gunaika, gunaika. That's accusative, feminine, singular, and it's a noun. This is where we get gynecology from the gunaika. So here you don't have an indefinite article. You just basically don't have any article at all. So you would translate it a woman. There are exceptions when you don't have an article and it should be the woman, for example, but we will get into those in the future. It's a little more complex. All right, these are our last verses that we're going to read for today. Eide ha ophthalmasu, ha dexias, scandalise se, excele, autan kai bale apasu sumfere garsoi hina apaletai enton melonsu kai me halantasomasu blethe ace geenan kai he dexiasu care scandalise se ekapsan autain kai bale apasu sumfere gar soi hina apaletai enton melon su kai me halantosoma su ace geenan apelthe. This is a pretty serious verse here. Jesus is warning that us about the seriousness of sin. I want to point out a few things that we've learned already just so we remember it better. Ha ophthalmos su, ha dexias. This is the same as saying your right eye. So we have 3 words in English, your right eye. But remember, they use the article with the personal pronoun, like your. So the eye of you would be your eye. And then often they'll put an adjective afterwards with the article to connect it to the previous noun. So this would be your right eye. Ha ophthalmos su ha dexias. So the eye of you, the right. So you'll see that a lot in Greek. But here's another way you can do it in Greek. You can put the adjective right before, and you can also put the personal pronoun before the noun. He dexiasu care. That's your right hand. You could also say, hey, care su he dexia. So these are two different constructions that you'll see in Greek. One, if the adjectives comes after the noun, you're going to duplicate that definite article. But here you don't have to repeat he because we have the adjective first. You could also say he dexia care su and put su afterwards. But Greek is pretty strange in that way. Thank goodness we don't have to speak it. We just have to be able to read it and understand it, right? Another thing I want to note is this verb scandalise, which is a third person singular pia, or present indicative active. Scandalise is the third person singular, and scandalizo would be I caused to stumble. So this is a present indicative active, just like we talked about in the last lesson with luo, lues, lue, luomen, luete, and luusin. This one is very similar. It just has the same ending but a different starting. This verb means to cause someone to stumble. We get scandalized from it, but the verb is very different now than back then. So if your right eye causes you to stumble because you're looking at something that you shouldn't be looking at, then it's better to pluck out your right eye. Now, the right eye, for people back then especially, was really important in battle because you needed your right eye to aim your arrows, for example. So that's why it's called the right eye. And down here, the right hand is also extremely important because most people are born right-handed. So your right hand was most important. And then I want to point out a few other little things. We have su, from you. We have soy, for you. And we have su, of you, as well as se, which is accusative, you as a direct object. So a lot of uses of that second person singular personal pronoun. And then here's another adjective that's pretty common. Halon ta somasu, your whole body. In fact, whole in English sounds very similar, halon. Halon ta somasu, and soma here is body. And then let's look at ace, ge'enan, ge'enan. That you pronounce two epsilons separately. Into hell, ace followed by accusative. Finally, I want to point out hen, not n, but hen here, rough breathing mark. One, it's also up here, one of your members. Hen ton melon su, one. That is nominative neuter singular. I'm going to show you all of the different forms of one now. Hace would be your masculine nominative singular. Mia would be feminine nominative singular. And hen, what we have here, is neuter nominative singular to match members. One of your members, members being plural neuter. So it's one of these members would be singular one. You don't have plural of one, of course, because you can't have more than one. And then henos, mias, henos, heni, mia, heni, henna, mian, hen. In our previous lesson, we talked about iota hen, mia keraya. So here it's neuter, iota is neuter, and keraya, stroke of a letter, is feminine. So that's why we have mia. Little review of previous lesson, and also just to emphasize how you say one in Greek. So that brings us to the end of lesson 10. Thank you for joining us on this tour of the New Testament in ancient Greek, and I look forward to seeing you next time.